Well, what do you know? It's Friday the 13th, and I figured what better way to celebrate that than to further explore the world of Friday ripoffs and knockoffs. Now, I've already done 2 full videos full of movies influenced by the slasher great. So for this one, I wanted to focus on movies that had a broader inspiration. Movies that took an overall feel or tone. So, if these ones aren't exactly direct duplicates, that's why. But let's check them out and realize that they may not be exactly but they are. I have no idea what that means. I wrote it, but I have no idea. Number 10. Back in 1982, Friday Mania was running wild, brother, and another one of the films that popped up in its wake was The Forest, which was written and directed by Don Jones, who actually passed away just last year in 2021, and starts in a familiar manner, with a couple of hikers out in the woods as an unseen stalker watches on. He gets a bit stabby, and then we're in Los Angeles and 2 couples are going camping, but the guys get delayed. But they get there eventually and are accompanied by this killer tune.
People do disappear, but where do they hide? In the dark side of the forest.
And our POV creeper seems to have flashbacks to when he was a little boy talking to his sister, and there's a mysterious mother ghost here looking for her children. There's also a guy who is definitely not wearing a wig under a ball cap here, and he attacks, killing Teddy, and multiple people see the ghost kids. So they're the real deal. They're actually the guy's kids' ghosts. And Evil Daddy, I guess, eats his victims, and I suppose this is definitely a twist on the theme, although the setup is pure Friday. It really switches gears by introducing cannibalism and the supernatural into the mix. Like, in the flashbacks, the crazy guy's wife was cheating on him, but while she was doing it, she just popped the kids into the closet. And after a whole middle section that strays from the formula, it steers back into Stalker territory for the finale with some fun silliness.
What's the matter with you, man? Are you crazy? Crazy? Of course I am! We're all crazy!
And ultimately, the Friday comparisons are fairly superficial, and it's certainly kinda its own thing, but it's also kinda dull, and is basically just like 4 people wandering around the woods for 90 minutes and sometimes sitting in a cave. Number 9. Here's another one from the 80s, and it's the gloriously titled Satan's Blade, and was directed by I. Scott Castillo Jr., and it remains his only credit. It begins with a bank robbery, and I guess this is an indication of how long it took to release. The calendar on the wall says that it's November of 1981, and the film takes place over a short amount of time, so I'm assuming that that's when this was shot, but it didn't get released until October of 1985, although IMDb states that it was 1984. But either way, there was a several-year gap between filming and release then. The robbers are revealed to be 2 women, and one double-crosses the other and shoots her, although when she moves her hand, there is no bullet wound visible at all. But then, she's also killed by someone unseen. And there's a legend up in the hills about a mountain man who wanders and kills, and a group heads for a winter camp getaway. The legend has the guy protecting his lands, killing anyone who trespasses on his territory, which that sounds pretty familiar. And they also say that he lives in the lake, which also sounds familiar. But there's a twist in that he was gifted a special knife from the dark gods with which to kill. There's a guy that looks like he shops at Ralph's R Us, and he tries to give them fair warning, and there's some drama, like this girl tries to seduce this married guy because, why wouldn't she? Yes, discount Arnie from Christine sure is a hunk. There's lots of visible boom mic in this one, and things take a very long time to happen, but the killer finally starts going into action in standard POV and gloved hand view. And after nothing happening for quite a while, a whole bunch of killing occurs in like a 5-minute period. All in all, the similarities are just in the base setup with the campers in the woods and the legend of the guy in the lake. The execution, again, is pretty different, and like The Forest, I can see why people refer to it as a Friday knockoff, but it's not really a direct clone, although it does kind of take the whole final shot as the fabled killer erupting from the lake bit. And you know, while watching this movie, I had a pretty crazy revelation. I realized that most likely, I am probably the only person on the planet at this exact moment that is watching Satan's Blade. Number 8. Let's hit up a more modern take on things with Don't F in the Woods. And seriously, that could just be an alternate title for the Friday series anyway. It begins as you'd expect, with a couple camping, and they do not listen to the title of the movie, and end up getting attacked by some sort of creature. A core of pretty grating characters then all decide to go on a camping trip together, including adult star Nadia White, who just keeps showing up in really low-budget horror films, and was in one of the Death Escort Service movies, and it's one of those classic horror movie group of friends who constantly argue with each other, and then start being stalked by the monster, who seems to be attracted specifically to those that are doing the deed. It even goes after those that are self-medicating, and I suppose because it's not really a slasher stalker and instead definitely a monster movie, that its place on this list is a little tenuous, but let's face it, it's a bunch of kids camping in the woods while being stalked by an unseen murderer that seems to particularly punish those who had just been intimate, so it fits. This was made on a budget of $10,000, and apparently the monster suit only cost $180 to make, and yeah, it's not great, but it's not terrible either. They got their $180 worth, and all things considered, it's fine. I feel like if the characters were even remotely likable, then this could have been very entertaining, but as it is, you're mostly rooting for the creature. All said and done, this one's barely an hour long, but there's another 10 minutes of credits and outtakes attached, so I mean, it's not like it's a big time commitment. And there's also a post-credit sequence setting up a sequel that does appear to be on its way. Number 7. Here's another classic, and it's 1989's Moon Stalker, which starts with an axe murderer in an RV, and then there's a family camping out in the woods, and they're interrupted by an old man talking about his son Bernie, but Pop seems to have a dark side, or at least an axe. It seems Bernie got sick and put into a hospital in the city, but it also seems like he's locked up in Pop's RV, and he's wearing a sort of a sack over his head. Pop sets him loose, so we have a sack-headed silent killer loose in the woods, hunting down campers. So yeah, this belongs on this list. He gets to work killing the family, but the daughter escapes, but then to slam home the Friday comparisons, there's a nearby camp where they're training new counselors. He soon sheds the sack though and heads into the grounds, and he hears his mother's voice in his head, of course, and it's kind of weird because the whole opening sequence with the family just kind of ends, and then it just becomes this whole other movie about the campers. Even with the shift in the look of the killer, it feels like they had these two separate movies and then somehow stitched them together, but that's not the case, but it sure seems like it, because then they retell the Bernie legend. But it's different coming from this guy. Like in this version, he had an old shack he lives in, so of course they try to find it, but then to be weirder, they introduce the cop that's hunting our killer down at the 1 hour and 10 minute mark. So yeah, this one's weird, but it's entertaining. It definitely feels like a solid 80s slasher, although there's some dull patches in the middle, but it's just funny how much this movie keeps deciding to switch itself up. One quick thing to note is that I really liked the score here. And it really stood out, and it turns out that this was the very first work for composer Douglas Pipes, who would then go on to do a bunch of movies for films like Monster House, Trick or Treat, and Krampus. Number 6. Let's go back to a more modern entry with 2012's Bloody Bloody Bible Camp that already pulls some Friday comparisons with setting the opening in the late 70s at a camp. But it's a Bible camp, and there's an unseen killer on the prowl, systematically murdering the whole crew, and then bounces to 1984 and Reggie's here with a new group heading up to a Bible camp, and although it's supposed to be the 80s, there sure is a lot of modern-looking products on the stands. The locals talk about the legend of the camp and Sister Mary Chopper, who was the masked villain 7 years earlier, and Dwayne here survived, and so did Millie here, and they're told to stay away or they'll be doomed, of course, and they even give Reg a musical number.
And all the girls will learn to cook and keep house for the clan. To be a loyal ranger rat to a loyal ranger man.
They do all the expected summer camp stuff, and it takes a very long time for anything to happen. Like, they do cut away to the killer occasionally, but she's not really doing anything, just being creepy. And meanwhile, it's just the kids at the camp in wacky situations, and sometimes humor works, and the others it falls completely flat. At times, it feels a bit like a trauma movie that's just not willing to go the distance, but Sister Chopper finally shows up and starts chopping, and there's a fun cameo from Reggie's actual wife, Gigi Bannister, and it's pretty entertaining, even if it just takes too long to get going. Again, it's not a carbon copy Friday ripoff, and more inspired by it with its basic structure and all that, but the influence is absolutely there. There's also a less fun cameo from Ron Jeremy playing Jesus, which I'm sure was amusing at the time, but now, with hindsight, seeing a guy being indicted on over 30 counts of sexual assault playing a religious figure is a little gross. Number 5. We've got another classic coming up with 1983's The Prey, and if you've walked into a video store anytime in the 1980s, you'll remember this box art. The opening music is very Friday-esque, and is set in 1980, giving us an older couple killed while camping. And this one was directed by Edwin Brown for Essex Productions, which was a studio that specialized in adult entertainment. And Edwin's other body of work is pretty much all films of that nature. Then, go figure, we have a group of young folk on a camping trip together, some of them in what was apparently an 80s wardrobe staple, the football jersey with just numbers on it. And kids...
First you play it real cool. Snuggle up in the old sleeping bag, and then slip it right to her.
Don't take dating advice from this guy. In the meantime, you'll get some footage of a snake eating something and other wildlife. There's a lot of wildlife footage in this one. And like Friday, you get the backstory of the local legend told by campfire. And then we get some flashbacks, and here's an interesting tidbit. This stuff only exists in the extended version of the film. This whole backstory, which includes several adult film actors and was not shot by Edwin Brown and was instead done by an uncredited director at the behest of Essex in order to include more nudity. This very lengthy sequence tells of a group of locals burning down a gypsy camp and one escaped named Leo. And here's the kicker. They never show Leo in the flashback. They only talk about him. It's pretty strange. It soon becomes clear that someone's out there in the woods watching them, and they start the violence, and it's a pretty large burnt guy. And then the film just hits this lull, this big draggy part in the middle, but it does finally kick in during the last 15 minutes as Leo gets in some pretty inspired kills. And for extra Friday inspiration, it's a very large deformed guy who's bald and has an asymmetric face. Interestingly enough, Leo is played by Carol Struckian of Addams Family Lurch fame, and yeah, this one definitely takes more inspiration from the Fridays, but overall it's pretty skippable, and the implications of the end are pretty gross. Number 4. Now we head to 2014's Camp Dread, which gives us Eric Roberts. Yay! And grown-up Jamie Lloyd as the town sheriff. And Roberts is a horror movie director who is forced to do a reality show set at a summer camp, but he actually intends to use it as a remake of one of his summer films called Summer Camp. The show contestants are a bunch of kids that think that they're there for some sort of outreach program, and of course the camp is on a lake, and this is one of those reality shows that only exist in the movies where there's no crew, and it's just a bunch of cameras mounted up in a bunch of places. Now, that sort of thing works in something like Big Brother, where there's like 4 rooms, but this is an entire camp. How many cameras do they have mounted up there? I do not want to edit that. Sure enough, someone is killing them, and OG Angela is here as one of the original stars of the original summer camp film, and I think it's kinda implied that Felissa's character is sort of based on Adrienne King, because she didn't return to the series because of issues with a stalker, and unfortunately, pretty much every character is mind-numbingly obnoxious. And there's some reality show stuff with Julian saying that he has a team that's supposed to eliminate the people and pretend to kill them when they're off the show. Robert keeps looking pretty suspicious, and yeah, in execution, this one feels very little like a Friday film, but again, the structure and setup is absolutely there. And I assume that having Felissa Rose, the idea was that the 80s film may have been sleepaway camp, but it feels more Friday to me. Like there's a rope from around a tree kill and everything. The killer reveal is pretty underwhelming and guaranteed to make you root for absolutely no one. And if you checked this out for Danielle Harris, who's prominently featured on the poster art and second build, you'll be sad to know that she's literally in one scene and then only shows up again in the final 5 minutes for one last round of stupidity. Number 3. On a previous episode of Friday the 13th Ripoffs, I talked about Bloody Murder, which featured Trevor Morehouse, our killer, who wore a hockey mask and a Michael Myers jumpsuit. A couple of people also mentioned the sequel, Bloody Murder 2: Closing Camp, which came out in 2003 and featured this as the cover, so clearly they were still going for the Friday-inspired theme, although the opening sequence actually gives us a pretty different-looking killer. We then have our standard setup at a summer camp at the beginning of a season and a new group of campers, so we are going for the Friday thing, and Tiffany Shepis is here. And it's revealed that one of the campers had a boyfriend named Jason who was killed there 5 years ago, and by Trevor Morehouse, and was the guy who died at the very ending of that movie, meaning that we are 5 years after the first film. And they do the whole telling the legend of the killer by campfire trope, and they all decide to play Bloody Murder. There's a fake Trevor who is wearing the hockey mask, and this one is directed by Rob Spira, who of course also gave us the classic Leprechaun in the Hood, so I expect trashy quality. And you know, with a wife as a costume designer, you pick up subtle clues, like if you want to have a character who's obnoxious and egotistical, you could make that pretty clear in a dialogue and have her character play out through interactions with others. Or you could just give her a t-shirt that says, "I heart me." But then the real Trevor shows up and is not ready to tend the goal and is wearing a blank white mask and overalls. And wait a second, in the first movie he did not wear this outfit, and Tracy dreamt about him in this one instead. So she clearly knows something. So she's either the killer or the filmmakers just didn't care about continuity. Wonder which one it is. This one actually follows the Friday formula more than the first one and is actually a slightly improved product, even if they made the killers look less derivative of its source material. If you are a Tiffany Shepis fan, then this is definitely the movie for you, since she's naked in pretty much every other scene that she's in, and oddly, every entry on the IMDb trivia page for the movie is about her nude scenes. Then, if you thought that switching up the costume meant it wasn't a Jason ripoff anymore and just having counselors at a camp doesn't mean anything, they go with the whole crazy parental unit out for revenge finale. Number 2. Here's one that I'm actually kinda hesitant to include here, but it's 1982's Alone in the Dark. This one's actually the directorial debut of Jack Shoulder, who gave us Nightmare 2 and The Hidden, and starts off strong with Bela Lugosi and Dr. Loomis. And we're at a psychiatric hospital, and since this is New Line and Robert Shaye co-wrote it, Lynn Shaye gets a part. Curly's here too, and here's the reason for this being on the list, as thin as that reason may be. There's an inmate named John Skagg, who goes by the nickname of the Bleeder. And when the group of them decide that the new doctor has somehow killed the old doctor that quit, they plan to kill him. Pleasance shows what a good doctor he is once again, like when an insane man asks him for a match, he gives it to him and then is pretty surprised when that inmate sets something on fire. There's a pretty solid musical interlude, and when there's a massive power outage, they all escape, and here's where that reason comes back in. The Bleeder steals a mask, a hockey mask, and starts killing with garden instruments. Now, here's the tricky part. Friday 3, the first entry with the hockey mask, came out in August of '82. And this came out just a few months later, in November of the same year. It's pretty likely that both films were in production around the same time, so it's hard to just straight out call Alone in the Dark a Jason clone because of that. It's possible that they had gotten word about the Voorhees face gear of choice and decided to match it, but at the time, no one was really sure that it was going to become such an integral part of the character. That being said, I think it's more likely that this was just a coincidence, especially considering that it's really the only similarity between the two films, and I should add, it's pretty great. Number 1. Let's finish with our most clear ripoff, Camp Death 3 in 2D from 2019. It starts with telling us that 3 summers ago, on Friday the 13th in 1979, at a camp in New Jersey, this bald, deformed guy in a mask killed a bunch of people, and later, they have decided to reopen the camp as rehabilitation center for the criminally insane. I think it's supposed to be a comedy, but the humor mainly seems to consist of, hey, there's a guy in a wheelchair, wouldn't it be funny if he fell out of it? Or I know, what if a guy in a wheelchair had to go up steps? The other jokes are kind of inexplicable, like potato salad level inexplicable. That there's a Ralph-like character, and look, there's a squirrel, and it bites this guy. Is that a joke? What's the punchline? Then there's the chef character. She's just standing here, and the boss just repeatedly yells at her to get back to work. Is this a joke? Is it a reference to something I'm unaware of? I'm so confused. Then, I dare you to explain what's going on in this scene.
Okay. I'd like each of you to come on up and introduce yourselves.
I also want to point out that there's at least 2 characters whose entire comedic premise is, are you ready for this? Are you ready to laugh? They swear a lot. They say the F word a whole bunch. That's funny, right? Oh, just kills me. Just kill me. A killer shows up looking pretty much like the Trevor Morehouse outfit, actually, and they make some direct references.
Now, I don't want to scare anyone, but I do want to give it to you straight about Johan.
The killer here is named Johan, and his mother killed a bunch of people until a girl cut her head off, and then Johan showed up to kill more. The girl from the beginning of the movie apparently went missing, and yeah, this is basically, you remember those terrible parody movies from the 2000s, like Epic Movie and Date Movie and stuff, where it was barely jokes and more like just, hey, remember this scene from, I don't know, X-Men or something? Well, here's that scene again, except someone gets hit on the head during it. That's this whole movie. It's just the exact formula and scenarios from a Friday movie with extremely terrible attempts at comedy strewn throughout. Comic gems like a policeman with a whole bunch of badges. Get it? He has like a lot of badges. That's a joke, right?
I'm gonna get going with your dead friend. Peace, pussies.
Get it? Because a policeman wouldn't normally say that and swear. But he did. He's a policeman and he swore. That's the joke. This is without a doubt one of the most painful experiences that I've ever had watching a movie. It's not quite roller gator bad or human centipede annoying, but it's definitely potato salad level eye roll inducing. Not one time during the entire length of the film did I even crack a smile. Not one joke landed. Not one performance showed a single ounce of comic timing. Nothing was clever nor interesting. Like, there's a whole sequence where they chase the killer on speeder bikes, like Revenge of the Jedi, because that's what that movie was called, and have lightsabers for no reason except, oh hey, remember Star Wars? That's the entire joke and reason to have this in the movie. And I'm quickly realizing that I hate low-budget failed comedies way more than I hate low-budget failed horror. It's just no contest. Meanwhile, I have no clue what this ending even means. It's just like random stream of consciousness. But I hated this movie, every single minute of it, so I guess that's why it's number 1. So there you have it, 10 movies for your Friday the 13th that are sort of based on, knockoff, inspired by, or are parodies of Friday the 13th. If you've seen some of these, let me know. If you enjoy any of these, if you want to defend some of them, you can. Although I didn't really tear apart many of them. A couple of them were a little on the boring side, but the majority of these were pretty solid, except for, of course, the last one, which I'm not a fan of. But quite a few in here that I am a fan of, and some things that you should check out that are very enjoyable. Let me know what you thought of these down below. Let me know if you want to keep on seeing more videos like this that are sort of inspired by Friday, but not full knockoffs or clones. And of course, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you enjoy these videos. Yeah, if you think about it, you want to go to my Patreon page. It's patreon.com/movietimelines. You can help contribute to the channel like these guys, awesome guys over here, do. In the meantime, you can also just keep on watching the video. I certainly appreciate that. And I'll see you very shortly for another great one. Thanks a lot, guys, and bye-bye.